Parker had always been a man who lived with shadows pressed close against his skin, like a second set of clothes stitched from danger. But this was different. It wasn't another safe house, another armored truck, another mobster who'd underestimated him. No, this was the kind of job that gnawed at your bones before it even began. The ocean had been whispering to him for months, feeding him rumors through drunken sailors, half-broken fishermen, and the kind of washed-up criminals who only lived for one last secret. A wreck out there in the Atlantic, older than most wars, rotting quietly in its graveyard of salt and silence. And inside it, something priceless. Gold, jewels, art, treasure that belonged to kings before kings were even born. But the whisper came with claws. 3 factions already had their eyes on the same score. The New York mob, the South American strongman whose offshore coffers bled corruption, and the richest bastard on the planet who bought and buried secrets like coins in a wishing well. All 3 wanted the same sunken prize, and all 3 would kill Parker just for breathing near it. Still, Parker was Parker. He didn't flinch at monsters. He planned around them. He sat in the back booth of a crumbling bar on Canal Street, the wood sticky with decades of sweat and beer, and watched Grofield work the room. Grofield wasn't just another thief, he was an actor, a man who could sell you a lie so well you'd thank him for it. Tonight he played the role of a half-drunk gambler, charming a pair of mob lowlifes at the bar while picking their pockets for information instead of cash. Beside Parker, Zen sat like a ghost. Nobody really knew where Zen came from. Some said he'd been Yakuza, others said he'd been military. What Parker knew for sure was that Zen didn't blink when knives came out, and he never missed when it mattered. He was the silence Parker needed when the noise got too loud. "You're serious about this one," Zen said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. Parker's eyes stayed on Grofield, who laughed too loudly at some bad joke. "Serious enough to risk drowning for it." "Or worse," Zen said. "Things stay buried for a reason." There it was again, that itch Parker couldn't shake. Every lead he'd followed about the wreck came wrapped in superstition, hushed warnings about ships vanishing in the same waters, divers who surfaced with blood in their eyes and voices that weren't their own. The ocean had swallowed the treasure whole, and it seemed to resent anyone trying to tear it back out. Parker didn't buy into curses. But he had lived long enough to know that sometimes the scariest thing wasn't what you believed in, it was what believed in you. The bar's jukebox clicked off. Grofield returned, sliding into the booth with a grin too sharp to trust. "They're spooked," he said. "Mob's been putting heat on anyone sniffing around salvage crews. Couple of guys already went missing off Jersey. And here's the fun part. One of those guys worked for Internal Affairs. Cops are in the soup too." Parker leaned back, his jaw tightening. Internal Affairs meant a trail, and a trail meant the mob wasn't just playing for gold, they were buying the law to sweep out anyone in their way. Zen's hand rested lightly on the table, the way a man rests near a weapon without touching it. Mob on one side. Dictator on another. Billionaire with more eyes than God on the third. And now cops. Grofield smirked. Sounds like Parker's kind of vacation. Parker finally spoke, the weight of his words settling like concrete. "This isn't just a job. It's the job. We pull this off, we don't need another score for the rest of our lives. But if we don't move fast, one of those bastards is going to own the ocean floor. And we'll be bones feeding fish." The jukebox clicked back on, sputtering out an old blues tune, something scratchy and worn like a voice from the grave. For a second, Parker could almost hear the ocean under it, a low hum rising from the depths, pulling at him. He had assembled the best crew he knew. He had the plan forming in his head, neat and cold like steel. But under all of it, under the smoke of the bar, under the city's endless noise, Parker felt it, the pull. The sea wasn't just holding treasure. It was holding something else. Something that didn't want to be disturbed. And for the first time in years, Parker wondered if the shadows that clung to him might finally have found something darker to feed on. The depths were calling. And Parker had already answered. The docks smelled of rust and brine, a cocktail of saltwater rot that clung to the lungs and left the taste of iron on the tongue. Parker liked it that way, ugly, filthy, honest. The sea didn't lie. It swallowed men whole, bones and all, and never apologized for it. Tonight, the docks weren't empty. A freighter groaned against its moorings, its deck shadowed with crates stacked like tombstones. Parker and Zen walked side by side, their boots echoing against the wooden planks. Behind them, Grofield carried a duffel bag, whistling low to himself, like a man whistling past a graveyard. Parker's contact was waiting at the end of the pier, smoking a cigarette that glowed like a lonely star in the dark. His name was Bishop, an ex-salvage diver with more scars than skin. Parker trusted him less than anyone, but Bishop knew the wreck, knew the coordinates, knew the currents, knew the black water where the treasure slept. "You're late," Bishop said, voice gravel ground into whiskey. "We're careful," Parker replied. Bishop's eyes twitched, darting past them toward the mouth of the bay. "Careful won't mean a damn when you're down there. The ocean doesn't care about your plans. It's alive in ways you don't want to understand." Zen tilted his head slightly, watching Bishop as though measuring him for a coffin. "Alive?" Bishop blew smoke, but his hand trembled. "Currents that shift against the tide. Lights where there shouldn't be lights. Sounds in your ears when your regulator's empty. The wreck doesn't just sit there, it waits. And it wants." Grofield chuckled under his breath. "I love a good bedtime story. Now let's talk brass tacks, how deep?" Bishop ignored the joke. 300 feet. The pressure's a killer. The wreck's a twisted coffin, sharp metal everywhere. And that's not counting the company you'll have. Mobs already scouting. Dictators sending his mercs. And rumor is the billionaires got drones sweeping the ocean floor. They'll all be looking for you. Parker took the cigarette from Bishop's lips, crushed it beneath his boot. "That's why we move before them. Give me the coordinates." Bishop hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't a job. It's a grave you're digging with your own hands." "Then we'll dig fast," Parker said, his voice a final verdict. 2 nights later, Parker's safe house smelled of gun oil and salt. The crew spread maps across the table, dim lamplight illuminating inked coastlines and the jagged red circle Bishop had marked. Zen sat silent, methodical, inspecting the diving gear. His hands worked like clockwork, no wasted motion, every valve, every seal tested twice. Grofield sprawled in a chair with a whiskey glass, flipping a knife between his fingers as if daring the shadows to move. "Let me get this straight," Grofield said finally. "We're breaking into the ocean's basement, cutting open a corpse of a ship, and stealing its heart while 3 of the world's meanest sons of bitches chase us down. Did I miss anything?" "You missed the part where we win," Parker said. Grofield grinned. "God, I missed that part." But even his grin faltered when the lamplight flickered. For just a second, the maps rippled as though moved by a breath, though no window was open, no draft in the room. Zen's eyes shifted, steady and cold. "There's something else," he said quietly. Parker looked up. "Say it." Zen's voice carried no fear, only certainty. "The wreck isn't just cursed. It's guarded." Grofield raised an eyebrow. "Guarded? By who, Poseidon?" Zen didn't smile. "By what the sea didn't kill. By what it kept." The silence that followed was heavier than lead. Parker hated silence. It left room for doubt. He slammed his hand flat against the map. "We're not here to tell ghost stories. We're here to take what everyone else is too afraid to touch. The mob, the dictator, the billionaire, they don't scare me. And whatever superstition Bishop's selling doesn't either. We take the treasure, we take our lives back, and we never look over our shoulders again." The conviction in his voice steadied the room, but when the lamplight flickered again, nobody spoke. Outside, the city groaned with midnight traffic, horns and sirens wailing like dying animals. But Parker's ears caught something beneath it, a low, steady hum, almost like the heartbeat of something enormous, pulsing from far, far below. The ocean was waiting. And in its waiting, it was listening. The ocean didn't welcome them. It swallowed them. Parker felt the weight of it pressing down from the moment his body broke the surface, heavy gear strapped tight against his chest, the regulator feeding him borrowed breaths. The world above vanished in a blink, the safe house, the plans, the city. Now there was only black water stretching endless in every direction, and the sound of his own lungs rasping through the mask. Zen slid into the sea beside him like a shadow come alive, moving with mechanical precision. Grofield splashed in last, muttering curses that fizzed into static through the comm system. "Christ, it's colder than a grave," Grofield hissed. "Keep moving," Parker said. His own voice was steady, but inside, something coiled tight. They descended, the boat above shrinking to nothing more than a faint light that bled away as the water darkened. At 50 feet, the ocean was a murky green. At 100, it turned black. At 200, it became a tomb. The wreck appeared out of the void like a dream breaking into nightmare. A massive husk of twisted steel, half buried in sand, its ribs jutting upward like the bones of a whale. Rust and coral clung to its skin, and the water around it seemed thicker, heavier, as though time itself had drowned here. "Jesus," Grofield whispered through the comms. "It looks wrong." He wasn't lying. Ships weren't supposed to rot like that. The angles were jagged, unnatural, the hull bent inward as if the sea had chewed it. Windows yawned open like mouths, dark and hungry. Zen's voice crackled cold and precise, pressure stable. "Entry point ahead." They swam closer, beams of their light slicing through the black. The beams didn't travel far, swallowed by murk that seemed alive. Parker's chest tightened. He'd been in 100 dangerous places, stared down killers, walked into mob strongholds, but this was different. The wreck wasn't just dead. It was watching. Inside, the corridors of the ship stretched narrow and cruel, metal jagged where it had torn. Parker led the way, light sweeping over faded murals on the walls. A face stared back at him from the rust, paint peeled but unmistakable. A woman, mouth open in a scream. "Tell me that's just paint," Grofield muttered. "Keep your head," Parker ordered. But he couldn't look at it long. As they moved deeper, their lights caught shapes on the floor. Helmets. Tools. Bones. Human bones, picked clean and scattered like dice. Zen crouched, brushing the sand off a skull. The jawbone was cracked, not by time, but by force. "Not drowned," he said. "Broken." Parker said nothing. His grip on his light tightened until his knuckles hurt. They reached what remained of the cargo hold. The space opened wide, beams of rusted steel arching above them like the ribs of some colossal beast. In the center, half buried in silt, something gleamed. Gold. Coins, chalices, jewels half-eaten by salt but still radiant under their lights. Treasure. The kind men killed for. The kind empires collapsed over. Grofield laughed, a sharp bark that echoed through the comms. "Holy, Parker, you son of a bitch, you were right." But Parker wasn't smiling. The treasure looked too perfect, too untouched, as though it had been waiting for them. Zen hovered silent, scanning the shadows. That's when Parker heard it, the sound. Not the creak of metal, not the rasp of their gear. Something else. A low groan, distant but alive, vibrating through the water, rattling his teeth. Grofield froze. What the hell was that? "Currents," Parker said quickly. But he didn't believe it. The groan came again, closer this time, like the shifting of something enormous. The silt around the treasure stirred, as if something beneath it breathed. Then Parker's light caught movement. At first, he thought it was a trick of the water, seaweed maybe, swaying slow. But then the shadows stretched, pulling along the walls, crawling upward, twisting into shapes that looked too much like hands. Grofield swore, thrashing backward. No. Nope. No way. Zen raised his light, steady as stone. The shadows recoiled for an instant, then stretched longer, reaching. Parker's heart hammered. They weren't alone down here. The wreck wasn't just a grave. It was a cage. Pack it up, Parker snapped. We move, now. Grofield didn't argue. Zen didn't hesitate. But as they turned, Parker swore he felt something brush against his ankle, cold and soft, like fingers trying to drag him back down. The groan roared again, and the wreck seemed to shiver around them. The ocean didn't just swallow men. It kept them. And Parker knew, with a dread he couldn't shake, that they had woken something that wanted to be fed. The ocean floor didn't forgive hesitation. Down here, 1 second too long, 1 breath too slow, and you were dead. Parker knew that truth in his bones. But as the groan rolled through the wreck again, vibrating the steel walls around them, he realized this dive wasn't about seconds or breaths, it was about survival against something far worse. Keep tight, Parker ordered. His voice crackled through the comms, steadier than he felt. Grofield's light jittered across the hold, bouncing over piles of treasure like fireflies in a grave. Zen was calm, but even his movements sharpened, every motion efficient and wary. Then Parker saw it, light. Not theirs. A pale glow seeped through the torn hull on the far side of the wreck. At first, it looked like the shimmer of the ocean itself. Then beams cut sharp through the black, dive lights. Other divers. Company, Zen said, flat and certain. Grofield swore, panic bubbling in his tone. Mob. Dictators, thugs. Billionaires, freaking robot army. Doesn't matter, Parker said. It means guns. The divers swam in, their lights glaring. 3 of them, bulky suits, weapons strapped to their backs. Mob muscle, Parker guessed. They moved with the sloppiness of men who thought the sea would bow to their paychecks. The wreck didn't bow. Parker motioned for his crew to drift back, using the shadows of the cargo hold as cover. But Grofield's light scraped across the treasure, spilling gold into brilliance. The mob divers froze mid-water, eyes wide behind their masks. One pointed, signaling to the others. The prize was right in front of them. Shit, Grofield hissed. Zen moved before Parker gave the word. One flick of his hand, and his knife glinted under the beams. He surged forward like a shark, silent and exact. The blade slipped between the ribs of the first diver's suit, finding flesh. Blood plumed out in a red cloud that drifted slow in the water, beautiful and horrific. The other 2 panicked. One reached for his weapon. The other turned to flee. And then the wreck moved. Not a groan this time. Not just sound. The walls trembled, silt raining down like ash. Something massive shifted in the shadows, deeper in the hold. The blood cloud swirled, and Parker saw it, the red wasn't dispersing. It was being pulled. Dragged. Move. Parker barked. But the fleeing mob diver never made it. The shadows rippled up the wall, stretching long and skeletal. Hands, too many hands, lashed out, wrapping around his helmet. His scream cut through the comms, high and animal, before the shadows yanked him into the black. His light went out. Grofield thrashed backward, nearly dropping his regulator. No, 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 what the hell was that? The last mob diver fired his weapon, bullets punching useless holes in the water. The recoil shoved him back, and straight into the silt pile where the treasure rested. The silt exploded upward, blinding them all. Parker's light cut through a blur of gold, bones, and something else. Something that writhed. The diver's calm shrieked with his scream as the treasure itself seemed to come alive, coins sliding off the mound as if pushed by invisible hands. Then something black wrapped around his torso. Not a rope, not seaweed, something with muscle. It yanked him down into the pile, his body folding at impossible angles. His screams cut short. Silence fell, heavy as the sea. Parker's crew hovered, breaths loud in their ears. The treasure mound shifted again, coins spilling into the water. For a second, Parker swore he saw an eye beneath them, pale, lidless, enormous. Watching. Zen's voice broke the silence. We leave. Now. Parker didn't argue. He grabbed Grofield by the shoulder, pulling him toward the exit. Zen brought up the rear, knife still ready though it seemed absurd against whatever hunted them. They swam fast through the jagged corridors, the wreck groaning around them like a dying beast. Twice Parker felt it. The brush of something against his fins, the pull of water against his gear, as though the sea itself wanted him deeper. When they finally burst free of the hull, the water outside looked darker than before, heavy with the blood cloud spreading outward in lazy tendrils. Grofield panted through the comms, voice cracking. We're not going back down there. Right? Tell me we're not. Parker didn't answer. He couldn't. Because in his gut, he knew the truth. They'd seen enough to know that the treasure wasn't just gold. It was bait. A lure. Something waiting in the deep for anyone greedy, or desperate, enough to take it. And Parker was both. Above them, the faint outline of their boat waited, small and fragile against the vast black sea. They kicked upward, but Parker couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't escaping. They were being allowed to leave. For now. The surface should have been salvation. It wasn't. Parker broke through first, dragging air into his lungs that tasted more like smoke than freedom. The night was thick, the waves restless. Their boat bobbed like a toy, lights dimmed against the endless black horizon. Grofield surfaced behind him, coughing into his regulator, eyes wide like a man waking from a nightmare. Zen came last, silent as always, though Parker saw the tremor in his hands as he gripped the ladder. They hauled themselves aboard, metal clanging under their boots. Water pooled across the deck, dripping off their gear, streaked red with the remnants of blood carried up from below. Grofield ripped off his mask and spat. We're done. That's it. Call it. Burn the maps. Forget the gold. Whatever the hell that thing was. It wasn't a thing, Zen cut in, calm but sharp. It was hunger. The word hung heavier than the sea spray. Parker stripped his gear, every motion deliberate, controlled. Inside, his heart was pounding like a hammer. He thought of the mob divers' screams, of the shadows that moved like living skin, of the pale eye watching from beneath the gold. And for the first time in years, he didn't know if he'd led his crew into profit, or into a grave. Grofield kept pacing, wringing seawater from his hair with shaking hands. You saw it too. Don't lie. You saw the way the blood didn't drift, it pulled. Like the water itself was sucking it down. And those hands. Christ, those hands. They weren't hands, Zen said. Then what the hell were they? Zen's silence was answer enough. The ocean slapped against the hull, louder now, like fists pounding from below. Parker glanced over the side. Nothing. Just black water that looked deeper than the sky. He turned away fast, but not fast enough. For a moment, he swore he saw movement, something pale, something long, sliding just beneath the surface like a serpent. He clenched his jaw. Get below. We regroup. We plan. Grofield snapped his head toward him. Plan. Plan. Parker, there is no plan against that. You can't rob the goddamn ocean. Parker met his eyes, steady and cold. Then maybe we rob the bastards chasing it instead. That shut Grofield up, but not because he agreed. Because something else had caught his ear. A sound. At first, Parker thought it was the wind. Then it grew clearer, wet, rasping, like breath dragged through broken glass. It was coming from the gear they'd dumped on the deck. Zen was already moving, knife in hand, crouching over the dripping regulator hoses. The sound rattled out of them, unnatural, guttural. As if the sea had crawled inside and refused to leave. Grofield stumbled back. Oh, hell no. Zen slit one of the hoses clean open. Water gushed out, thick and dark, not seawater but something heavier, almost black-red. It spilled across the deck, steaming as it touched the air. Grofield gagged. That's blood. It wasn't just blood. It writhed. The liquid twitched as though alive. Tendrils snaking across the planks toward Parker's boots. He kicked it back, heart slamming against his ribs. Zen leaned close, his face unreadable. It followed us. The words landed like nails in Parker's skull. The ocean hadn't let them go. It had climbed up with them, seeping through their hoses, hitching a ride in their gear. Whatever lived down there was patient. It didn't just guard the treasure, it hunted anyone bold enough to touch it. The blood kept crawling, spreading like veins across the deck. Parker grabbed a can of fuel, splashed it over the mess, and struck a flare. The fire caught fast, roaring orange against the night. The blood hissed, twisting and curling as if screaming in silent agony before turning to ash. The smell was unbearable, copper and rot. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the flames and the endless slap of waves against the hull. Grofield broke first, voice hollow. We're cursed. Zen sheathed his knife. Not cursed. Chosen. Parker didn't want to believe either. But deep down, he knew the truth neither man said out loud: the ocean didn't care about curses or choices. It wanted payment. And it had marked them for the debt. He looked back toward the horizon, where the water met the night. Somewhere out there, the mob, the dictators' mercs, the billionaires' hunters, they were still coming. But they had no idea what was waiting for them. Parker's jaw tightened. Maybe that was the only advantage left. The sea had chosen them. And before it dragged them back down, Parker intended to make sure someone else bled first. The storm came without warning. By midnight, the sea heaved like a beast in chains, waves battering Parker's boat until the hull screamed. Rain hammered the deck, turning every surface slick and treacherous. Lightning split the sky, painting the horizon in jagged white. For a breath, Parker saw them, another vessel shadowing theirs, bigger, armed. The mob. They found us, Grofield shouted over the storm, clutching his rifle. How the hell did they find us out here? Parker already knew. Somebody had been feeding them information. Maybe Bishop. Maybe someone else. It didn't matter now. The mob's lights cut through the dark, sweeping across the waves like predators' eyes. Zen stood steady against the rocking boat, calm in the chaos. They're boarding. Parker's mind moved fast, slicing the situation apart. They couldn't outrun the mob, not in this storm. That left one option: fight. The mob's vessel pulled alongside with a sickening groan, steel against steel. Grappling hooks clanged, lines taut. Figures clambered across, silhouettes hulking in rain and lightning. Parker raised his weapon, firing into the first shape. The man toppled back, swallowed by the sea. But more came, shouting, guns barking. The deck erupted in chaos, Grofield firing wild, Zen moving like a blade through flesh, Parker holding the line with cold precision. Blood mixed with rain, washing across the planks. The mob didn't fight like amateurs. They were here to take the wreck, and kill anyone who touched it. But in the middle of the gunfire, Parker heard something else. The sound. That low, guttural groan from the depths, vibrating through the hull, rattling his bones. The mobsters heard it too. One froze mid-swing, eyes wide. "What the hell?" he started. The sea answered. A wave crashed against the side of the boats, higher than the rest, too heavy, too strong. It wasn't just water. It was thick, darker than it should have been, carrying with it something alive. Hands. Dozens of them. Pale, slick, stretching from the water like ropes of flesh. They clamped onto boots, ankles, rifles. One mobster screamed as he was yanked off his feet, dragged shrieking over the railing into the black. Another tried to cut himself free, blade flashing. But the hands didn't bleed, they multiplied, wrapping around his throat, crushing until the scream gurgled into silence. Grofield fired into the mass, bullets useless. "They're climbing out of the goddamn ocean." Zen didn't waste bullets. He hacked at the limbs, severing them clean, but even the severed pieces writhed across the deck like worms. The mobsters panicked, firing into the water, into the storm, into shadows that bent and reached. Their lines broke fast. Parker kept firing, but his gut knew the truth, the sea wasn't choosing sides. It wanted all of them. Lightning split the sky again, and Parker saw it, looming just beyond the waves, larger than the wreck, larger than the boats. Not a shape, not entirely. More. Like the outline of hunger itself. An eye glared at him through the storm, pale and endless, the same eye he'd glimpsed beneath the gold. He froze. For the first time in years, Parker froze. Zen's voice cut through, sharp and grounding, "Move." The mob's vessel lurched, one of its engines gutted by the waves. Men screamed as the sea ripped them away. In seconds, their numbers halved. The survivors scrambled back, cutting lines, retreating in terror. Their boat turned, retreating into the storm, swallowed by rain. The hands receded, sliding back into the waves. The groan faded. Silence, except for the storm. The deck was carnage. Blood washed across in red streaks. Severed, writhing flesh melted into water, steaming as though the rain itself was burning it away. Grofield collapsed against the railing, trembling. "We're not thieves anymore. We're bait." Parker said nothing. He couldn't. Because Grofield was right. Zen stood over the mess, blade dripping with both blood and seawater. His face was calm, but his words cut deep. "The mob isn't done. The dictator's mercenaries are coming next. The billionaire's hunters too. They all want the gold. But the ocean will take them the same as it took the mob." Parker finally spoke, voice low and cold. "Then we use it. Let them bleed first. We'll take what's left." But as the words left his mouth, he knew how hollow they sounded. Because he could still feel it, the eye in the storm, the hunger in the water. The ocean didn't care about plans. The ocean wanted him. And it would never stop. The storm had broken by dawn, but the ocean didn't calm. It was too still, too glassy, as if waiting. Parker didn't trust it. He stood at the prow of their boat, the horizon stretched out like a wound that never closed, the wreck waiting beneath. His crew was silent behind him. Grofield with hollow eyes and shaking hands, Zen sharpening his knife as though steel could matter against something that didn't bleed. They weren't alone. On the water, the dictator's gunboat loomed like a predator, bristling with mercenaries. To the east, a sleek yacht cut the waves, white, pristine, the billionaire's flag snapping in the wind. And somewhere, Parker knew, the mob still circled, licking their wounds but not retreating. All three factions had come for the wreck. All three were about to learn the price. "Hell of an audience," Grofield muttered. Parker didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the water. The silence was too loud. Then the first shot rang out. The dictator's men opened fire on the billionaire's yacht, bullets hissing across the water. The yacht's guns replied, tearing into the murks. The sea exploded with splashes and screams. "Here we go," Grofield said, laughing hollowly, madness creeping into the sound. Zen turned to Parker. "Decision time." Parker's jaw clenched. He should have told them to retreat, to vanish into the storm's wake. But he didn't. Because beneath the fear, beneath the weight pressing on his chest, there was something else: obsession. That treasure was still down there. And he couldn't let go. He raised his hand. "We move. Now." The wreck rose from the black again, its twisted ribs reaching like broken fingers. This time, the sea didn't hide its hunger. The water around the ship pulsed, faintly glowing, shapes twisting inside the glow like shadows made flesh. The factions dove too, mercenaries in armored suits, sleek divers from the yacht, desperate mobsters with stolen gear. Lights cut through the dark like spears. And the wreck groaned. The sound rattled Parker's skull, vibrating through his bones. The walls of the ship seemed to breathe. Silt erupted, and from it came hands. Arms. Faces that weren't faces, stretched skin, hollow eyes, mouths open in endless screams. The treasure mound split open. Gold spilled upward, as if floating toward them, dazzling under the beams. For a moment, every diver, Parker included, froze, hypnotized. Then the mound shifted again, and Parker saw it for what it was. Not treasure. Not entirely. Bones. Skulls stacked among the coins. Skeletons tangled with jewels, flesh fused to chalices, ribs pierced with gold. The treasure wasn't hoarded, it was made. Grofield's scream burst through the comms. "It's them, it's the ones it took." The shadows struck. Mobsters vanished first, dragged into cracks in the hull by dozens of clawed hands. Mercenaries fired wildly, bullets sparking off steel, before the water swallowed them in a boiling cloud of blood. The billionaire's divers tried to retreat, but the treasure pulled at them, chains of gold wrapping around their limbs, dragging them into the pile. Parker's crew fought like cornered animals. Zen's knife flashed, severing limbs that grew back as fast as he cut. Grofield thrashed, firing his spear gun until it jammed, his laughter breaking into sobs. Parker pressed forward, toward the heart of the hold. He had to see it. He had to know. And there it was. An eye. Pale, lidless, vast. Bigger than the hold itself. It stared through him, into him, and Parker understood. The wreck wasn't cursed. It was a mouth. The treasure wasn't wealth. It was payment. Every coin, every jewel, every bone, was an offering to the thing that lived beneath, a god of the deep that fed on greed. And Parker had brought it more. The eye blinked, and Grofield was gone, swallowed whole by the shadows, his scream cut short. Zen fought until a dozen hands pinned him, dragging him down, his knife flashing once, twice, before vanishing into the black. Parker alone remained, frozen before the mound, the eye filling his vision. His lungs screamed for air, his body shook with terror, but he couldn't look away. The voice wasn't sound. It was pressure in his skull, a tide in his blood. "You took. Now you give." The gold rose around him, wrapping his arms, his legs, pressing against his chest like chains. He struggled, but the sea was stronger. Above, the faction's boats burned, screams carrying faintly into the night. Below, Parker was pulled into the mound, treasure fusing to his skin, bone grinding into bone. The last thing he saw was the eye, pale and endless, swallowing the light. And then the ocean closed its jaws. The wreck still waits, patient. New whispers crawl along the docks, tales of fortune, of gold beneath the sea. Men sharpen knives, load rifles, plan dives. The ocean doesn't stop them. It never does. Because hunger always wins.